Hello, my name is Ian Dean, and today I will be talking about how Mesh Baker can be used to bake meshes with submeshes and with tiling. And plants are about the worst case for that. So let's take a look at this scene. This is from a demo from Michael O's Tropical Nature Pack, which is available in the Asset Store. As you can see, it looks fabulous, but draw calls are currently there's 387 draw calls in this view. That's a bit heavy, so let's see what can be done to reduce that. So here's the scene. Now, how would you even go about tackling a scene like this? There's if we look in the hierarchy, there's a huge number of plants in here. How would you go about grouping things together? Well, an excellent place to start is a tool that Mesh Baker has built in, which is this list shaders in scene. So if I click this, it basically prints a report and it groups all the objects in the scene together by material and shader. It analyzes whether they use light maps, how many submeshes they have, any problems that they're likely to encounter that will make baking difficult. So that's running. It takes about a minute or so, and that can be copied and pasted into a spreadsheet extremely easily. And let's get a spreadsheet ready. So as soon as that report completes, oh, it's still running. Here we go. So I come over here and paste it in. So let's have a look at this. Expand some of these columns a little bit so you can see. So there's object name, light map index, whether the object's static or not. Everything is false in this scene. Whether it's got overlapping submeshes, how many materials, which is how many submeshes it has, whether there's out of bounds UVs. So that tiling can be created using out of bounds UVs. And this is the material. This is the shader, and the report has grouped everything together by shader and material. Now, it's very useful actually for analyzing a big scene. I can see which shaders are being used, and which materials use them, and which meshes. And it's actually organized into objects which can be baked together. This is a very conservative grouping. You can actually do much better than this report. But this report is objects that that Mesh Baker knows it can bake together. Now, wouldn't it be nice if Mesh Baker could automatically bake some of these, or just like take this report and create bakers based on it? And actually it can. That's what this auto-generate bakers does. It essentially looks through that report. However, it doesn't take into account submeshes and tiling. If objects have those on it, then it'll ignore them. And most of these plants have tiling and submeshes, so most of them are going to get ignored. But I did run it anyway, just to see how it would do, and actually it did pretty well. So if we look in here, it created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or so bakers. And looking at some of these, it grouped all the roots together, grouped all the ground covers together. 94 separate objects. That's 94 draw calls. It's put together into the ruins. It's grouped all these other plants together, and these will bake perfectly together. You can just go down and click Bake Material into Combined and bake, and get all that stuff for free. Just to show you, I did bake the ruins together, so those 94 separate meshes. Here's the baked version, so you can see that that's one mesh versus those 94. So that's quite a big savings. Now, what about everything else? So there's still a lot of plants in here. Can those be baked together? And the answer is yes. Now, could we bake them all together? Well, we'll run into two limits. One is the 64K limit for meshes. Meshes can't have more than 64,000 vertexes, so it'd probably run into that. Now, MeshBaker actually has a separate version of a MeshBaker called a multi-mesh baker, which will distribute those across multiple 64,000K meshes. So that's actually not too much of a problem. The bigger problem is the atlas size. The maximum atlas size is 4096 by 4096 pixels, and we would very quickly run into that. So we're probably going to have to group a few plants together and create a combined material, and then we'll be able to combine all of those plants into that group, and we probably could end up with, maybe 10 or so groups or less for all these plants. So now it can be difficult in a scene like this that's so busy to work. So a better way to do this is to go into a separate scene and create the combined material and debug it, make sure it's working out really well, and then come back into this scene and use it. So now I'll go and show you how you'd go about doing that. So I've skipped ahead a little bit. I've just opened another simple scene in which to do the combining. And as you can see, I've got 6 different plants in here that we're going to combine together. It's easier to work in a simple scene like this. We can create the combined material, debug it, and then take that combined material back to the other scene, and it's very quick and easy to use. I'll show you how to do that. So we've got these 6 plants. Let's create a MeshBaker object and combine those together. So here's my MeshBaker object. In this scene, we're actually mostly working with the texture baker part of it. Now, because these are plants and they have a bark material and a leaf material, and those use tiling, and the technique that was used to get the tiling is they use Out of Bounds UVs. In order to combine these different plants together, we're going to have to use the Fix Out of Bounds UV option. Now the Fix Out of Bounds UVs is going to cause tiling in the textures, or in the atlases, which does waste a lot of atlas space. So actually a good strategy, which would work well on the scene we were just looking at, would be to bake all these separate objects, or all the objects of the same kind together, and then you don't have to worry about the Fix Out of Bounds UVs thing, and you don't get tiling in your atlases. Anyway, I'll show you this technique first. Okay, so Fix Out of Bounds UVs, I'm going to check that. Now what we have to do is add all the materials on these. So we're going to need multiple combined materials because there's submeshes. So, there's 2 bark textures and 2 leaf textures. So we go up to there, and actually I'm going to drag my MeshBaker object to here, and then I can see my texture baker, my MeshBaker right in this window, and it doesn't disappear on me when I'm clicking on things. So I can click, it looks like we've got 2 bark textures, so we're actually going to need an extra slot. So there's the leaves. Oops, I overwrote the other one. And there's the bark. And we add this thing. It goes there, and we're going to need a 3rd slot for the ficus. Now these other plants actually use the same textures, so I can ignore those. And but the ficus has its own materials, so we'll drag those over. So what I've done is MeshBaker will take these 2 bark materials and bake them together into an atlas for those materials. So combine all the textures in those materials into a combined material, and then it will take all the leaf materials and bake them into this combined material. Now we have to create those materials, so I can click this Create Empty Assets for Combined Material button. It's creating a video game seems to be so much about organizing. So let's call this combined mat. What is this? Disophorus. It's good to name things well. Ficus. Save. So it created the combined material. It also created these two materials. So let's click on those and name those properly. So one of them is the bark material, and the other one is the leaf material. Okay, now the other thing, and this is an important step, it's easy to forget this, we should set the shaders on these materials. So currently they're both set to diffuse, but this is a bark texture, so it should use the same shader that all these source barks used, which is Nature ATS Soft Inclusion. And the leaf texture should use the same texture that the leaves used. Doesn't have to use the same one, but for best results, Soft Occlusion leaves. Now I think we're about ready to go. Oh, I have to add the objects. So objects to combine. We're going to add these. Bake into combined. Oh, there was an error. List of objects contains duplicates. Oh, I missed Ficus 2. There we go. Okay, so this takes about a minute or so to complete. Now, in this case, I've decided to combine all of these disforest trees with the ficuses, but I might be better off in that scene, as I was saying before, just to combine all the disforests, because they all use the same material, and separately combine all those into one mesh baker, and then combine all the ficuses into another mesh baker. So each plant of its own type would be combined into its own mesh baker. The advantage of that is you end up with, you don't have to worry about the tiling, so you don't have to use that fix Out of Bounds UVs, which bakes tiling into the atlases, which makes your atlases much bigger, which I'll show you in a moment. And it's guaranteed to produce pretty much exactly the same result as your source. So, okay, let's see how this worked. So I'll bake this into a combined scene object. So there we are. Yeah, so there's our source and there's our result. It's pretty good, but notice that the color's off a little bit. Mine's a lighter green. So what's going on there? If we look in the material, notice it's got the atlas, but it's also got all these other properties. And if I look up the source, like if I click on this disforest, it had, the main color was a gray, and then these sliders were arranged like this. The other options were all one. If I look at my combined material, the sliders are different and the main color's different. So let's make this more of a gray. And then the sliders, I'll try to arrange them about the same as the other one was. That looks a lot better. So my trees look almost the same as these other trees now. So zoom in. You may notice the place that the combined mesh isn't going to do as well as on the bark, and that's because if we look in the bark, you can see what it's done with the tiling. So because the bark texture is tiled all the way up the tree, this bark texture has been tiled a whole bunch of times. And same with the thickest bark texture, it's been tiled. This one has been tiled a ridiculous number of times. So if you look in real close, it'll actually, the quality of my bark looks pretty blurred because it's being sampled so heavily, whereas if you look at the original, the quality of the bark is much better. So that's a case where as I was saying before, a better strategy here might have been to bake all the disforest trees together into one mesh baker and then break all the thicknesses together into another mesh baker. But a lot of people would say this is good enough, and this way you have more flexibility. You can combine all the thicknesses and all the disforests all into the same mesh baker object. So now, how would I go about using this in the other scene? So let me just quickly show you how to do that. So I'll save this so I could come back to it if I had to, and then I'll go back to the demo scene. So give it a second to come to life here. And here, that's from before, so I'll just show you how to do this. So I'll create a mesh and material baker object. I'm not going to use the texture baker component because I've already baked the combined material in the other scene. So I'm going to remove that component. So I've just got the mesh baker, but I need to set this combined material object. So let's go get that one. I think it was this one. That looks about right. Yeah. And then I need to add all the objects. So I could go like this, say I'm going to add 30 and drag them into the slots, but that's horrifyingly painful. So is there a shortcut? Well, yes, there is. I can go to the plants and I could find, like here's the thickest plants. I can find the material so the thickest branch material, I can drag that over here, and then I can click this, if I select the containing folder, and I put my mesh baker object in the focus here. Okay, now when I click this add selected meshes, it's going to find all the thickest, or all the objects under this game object root that use thickest branch material and add those to my mesh baker. So add selected meshes, and if I look in here, added 45 objects. So is that right? Did it add those? Click there. Interesting. Did these all use that? That thickest branch as well. Oops, I messed up. I clicked using shader. So those are all the objects that use that shader, not the material. I dragged it to the wrong slot. So let's clear that. None. Go back to my mesh baker and set this back to 0. And then go get my thickest material again. This time drag it to the material slot, not to the shader slot, and add selected meshes. And now it got 0 objects. That's because I don't have the root of all those plants selected. Add selected message, added 14 objects. So that got those. And then we can do the disforest ones. So I'll select the leaf material, add selected meshes. Now we go down to that mesh baker object. It only picked up 1. Oh, that's because of my selection. Add selected meshes. Added 21 objects. So my mesh baker 2 there. So I've got now all the ficuses and all the diasphoruses, so I can bake those. And when I've done those, 38 objects will become 1. So yeah, so there's my combined material. There's my combined meshes. So these are all one big object, and they all use that combined material that we created in the other scene. So I hope you have found this demonstration useful. Mesh Baker 2 is available in the Asset Store. It can also be purchased directly from Digital Opus. And big thanks to Michael O for letting us use his Tropical Nature pack in this demonstration. Thank you very much.